Hello everyone, and welcome to this live box. My name is Claire L. Evans. I'm a writer and musician based in Los Angeles, aka the ancestral and unceded indigenous lands
Mm-hmm.
of the Tongva and
Yeah,
Chumash
exactly.
peoples.
Mm-hmm.
I've been invited by HOLO magazine to host this kind of unconventional,
And can you give me the
experimental
code for presentation?
living document we're calling the MUTEK recorder, which
Yeah,
was
I
both
expected
here
to have code, but
now
shall I share Google Slide
on
then?
the HOLO website. I'm sorry, is everyone else getting the secondary audio that I have, or is it just me? Okay, well, I'm gonna Karen. We're dealing. Okay, it's okay now. Okay, so hi, yes, I've been invited by HOLO magazine to host this live stream, which is kind of an experimental living document that we're calling the MUTEK recorder, which will live both here daily as a sort of live stream recap of the daily forum, and as well on the HOLO website, where we will be building a dossier, accumulating insights, references, thoughts, links, quotes, key takeaways, hot takes, and other musings inspired by the daily conversations that are going to be held during this year's forum. The dossier is our attempt to simultaneously process and document our impressions of this forum as it happens. So it will be, by definition, perhaps incomplete, collage-like, kind of refractory. It'll be a reflection of the interests of the HOLO editorial team as well as my own. And I'll be sharing some sort of daily updates from the dossier here in this box, in this live stream. But I hope that you take some time to browse the dossier as it evolves, both as a way of reflecting on your experience during the forum, and I hope perhaps in the future as a way of remembering it. As I wrote in my intro post for the dossier, what we think is a consequence of the tools that we use to think. And the more expansive and open we can be about seeking out new tools, be they languages, word processors, pencils, forests, planets, the more fully we can come to understand the world. So this dossier as it exists is our tool for kind of understanding this festival in its fullness, but it's one of many different approaches that we could take. And we're going to highlight that here every day by inviting a special guest to share how they sort of what their personal working experience of recording is. So how they research, how they organize their thoughts, how they process, document, remember, and synthesize, how they turn information into knowledge. We are, of course, now entering into our second year of pandemic life, and I, for one, have been feeling even more atomized and disassociated than usual. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to dive into some big ideas and pick up some strategies for thinking from people who do it really well. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you appreciate that as well. Before we get to today's guest, let's take a look at today's dossier and reflect on some of the highlights of the forum so far. So I'm going to share my screen and take you to the HOLO recorder. Now, of course, this morning, the forum kicked off with a keynote by Benjamin Bratton, who will be a guest on this program next week, talking about the artificial and the synthetic. Now, Bratton's work recently has concerned, among other things, this emerging but key distinction between the artificial and the synthetic, right? And from what I understand, that's basically the difference between something which simply imitates or resembles something and something that is a deliberately genuine and meaningful version of something. In his talk, Bratton sort of used the economist Herbert Simon's example of the distinction between the artificial and the synthetic. So Simon said that that difference was the difference between a cheap plastic diamond, i.e. the artificial, and a laboratory-grown diamond that's identical to a real diamond at the molecular level. That would be the synthetic. And Bratton uses this framing to talk about computation on a planetary scale, right? Proposing that synthetic intelligence, not artificial intelligence, is what we really should be pursuing, and perhaps are already pursuing simply by being a kind of manifestation of the planet's ability to know itself. Bratton used this thought experiment, which I'm highlighting here right now, of the Blue Marble movie. So sort of a hypothetical sped up representation of the entire multi-billion-year history of Earth that would reveal, among other things, the moving of continents, the emergence of life, and then eventually the emergence of a technological sensing layer, that planetary crust of satellites and fiber optic cables and the like. And Bratton talks about sort of seeing that emergence as an emergence of planetary sapience. So synthetic intelligence, it seems, fortunately, includes us And Bratton cites examples of the synthesis of human and machine intelligence that might result in insights or creativity that would be impossible for either machines or humans to accomplish on their own. I'm going to bot back to my face for a second. So synthetic intelligence is interesting. And I think Bratton's framing of the artificial versus the synthetic, as well as this really interesting point he made early in the keynote about how no one single neuroanatomical disposition has a privileged monopoly on how to think intelligently, which is, I think, an elegant way of saying that, there's no moral superiority to any specific kind of intelligence. That all echoes some research that I've been doing recently and some reading I've been doing recently about both unconventional computing, which is a discipline in which researchers are seeking out novel biological substrates for computational purposes. So, for example, building computers out of slime molds for fungal mycelium, or the fluid dynamics of marbles or other natural phenomena. And some research I've also been doing into artificial life, which is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of AI research, in that it concerns building intelligence from the bottom up rather than from the top down. So rather than mapping and modeling individual synaptic connections in the human brain, artificial life researchers are recreating biological processes by setting code-based organisms to compete with one another in an evolutionary way and kind of seeing what happens. And one of A-Life's founding thinkers, who's a computer scientist named Christopher Langton, he writes about life as being this dynamic, nonlinear system, one which emerges from the complex interactions between all of its constituent parts. And studying life in a purely analytical way, in sort of the traditional approach of biology or lab work, looking at all those constituent parts in isolation from one another, kind of doesn't make sense if you're looking at studying life as a whole, or intelligence, which of course is a natural kind of consequence of life, as a whole, because you're kind of losing those critical interactions which define life. So it's much more generative to take a synthetic approach, examining all those constituent parts in each other's presence, and even building instances of those parts in silico, again, in order to see what behaviors emerge naturally. And the idea is that, hopefully those behaviors in kind of cumulative way will spark the kind of open-ended evolutionary creativity which led to intelligent life in the first place, and all these kind of extrasensorial technological trappings that allow us as living beings to even entertain these questions to begin with, which I think Bratton was kind of getting at with this idea of planetary sapience. So essentially, Christopher Langton, the A-Life researcher, says rather than take living things apart, artificial life attempts to put living things together. And I don't think Bratton is drawing from A-Life research necessarily, although I certainly wouldn't be surprised if he was well read in that department. But I thought it was an interesting concordance anyway, that both practically in terms of computer science research and, sort of fertile avenues for computer science research, and philosophically in terms of thinking about life, creating intelligence, that putting things together is always going to be more productive than taking things apart. It's this synthetic rather than analytical approach that will take us farther, because it kind of moves with the flow of life rather than against the flow of life. Although, of course, we have to be careful, because we don't want our pursuits in this domain to demand so many resources that they actually obliterate the current instances of life on Earth, which is a tenuous balance that Bratton acknowledged at the opening of his talk. There's another really great moment from what I thought, where he was talking about visiting a factory in Shenzhen and seeing people and robots working side by side. And it's, this sort of struck him as a serene and calming environment. I think is a kind of beautiful image. He said it didn't feel like a factory in the Charlie Chaplin sense. It felt like a garden in the Richard Brautigan sense. Of course, referencing this lovely Richard Brautigan poem, All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace, which we have linked for you in the HOLO dossier, so you can read it in its entirety. But I just want to quote sort of the opening stanza of this poem, in which Brautigan writes, "I like to think, and the sooner the better, of a cybernetic meadow where mammals and computers live together in mutually programming harmony, like pure water touching clear sky." it's kind of a North Star for me, this image, this kind of utopian agrarian image of what's possible perhaps when artificial life, synthetic life, various forms of intelligence finally kind of cohere into one sort of self-aware entity. Switching gears, another panel that we watched closely today, and I'll see if I can pull it up in the dossier, was the discussion on monetizing digital art and what has changed since NFTs have become a economic proposition for digital artists. I think after the exaggerated hype cycle of NFTs earlier this year, which was kind of jarring for a lot of people. I can't find this dossier right now, so I'm just going to talk to you about it. After all of that hype, we're all kind of reassessing our preconceptions of the value of digital art and the role that it can play in kind of the growing mainstream adoption of cryptocurrency and the blockchain. So for those of us who have been toiling making digital art for a long time, under the assumption that it will always kind of be seen as an economically less valuable medium, it does all feel quite surreal. And I'm thrilled to see some of my favorite artists of my generation and previous get their bag, as it were. There are a couple things I really appreciated in this NFT panel. One was Katie Desbiens-Denwell's bemused questioning of the term crypto artist. It does seem kind of funny to define oneself using the terms of the medium of exchange. Like artists who sell paintings at Art Basel, don't call themselves like money artists, although maybe they should. So I imagine that there will be a distinction that will begin to emerge, or perhaps is already emerging, between artists who are deploying smart contracts and using the blockchain as a kind of vital conceptual or material aspect of their practice, and artists who are using the blockchain, as a more efficient way to sell their work or as a way to verify or authenticate provenance in a more traditional market. That being said, there's certainly lots of really interesting people who are calling themselves crypto artists with pride. I think perhaps because it signifies a certain closeness to an emerging, undefined, exciting thing. Another point I really appreciated in this panel was Elena Zavalev talking about the role of community in the NFT artist marketplace. And I'm largely a spectator in this world, full disclosure. I mean, I've done a few NFTs, but to me, this is the most novel and exciting part of crypto art. The fact that artists are collecting one another's work with a volume and vocal enthusiasm at a scale that I've never seen before, really. I mean, largely because the traditional art marketplace is too financially prohibitive for the kinds of the small scale armchair collecting that is really the lifeblood of the NFT marketplaces. Like on Hic et Nunc, which is a Brazilian NFT platform built on the Tezos blockchain, which was mentioned multiple times during today's panel discussion, artists are regularly selling inexpensive editions to one another, which makes owning their work accessible to a broader category of people. And I've written about this actually, like how these inexpensive editions and the relative exchange rate of cryptocurrencies, relative to the cost of living around the world, has opened up all kinds of new economic realities for artists like outside of Europe and the US. There's these massive crypto art scenes in Brazil, Malaysia, Turkey, the Philippines. I find all of that extraordinarily exciting, and I'm really enthusiastic to see kind of how that unfolds and what happens next. Speaking of extraordinarily exciting things, I think it's time to welcome our guest for the day. I'm not sure if he's here. I hope that he is here. Yes, there he is. So today, Today, my guest is the sound artist, designer, and electronic musician Yuri Suzuki, a prolific and innovative maker. His work can be seen in many international museum collections. It examines the relationship between people and their environments through the medium of sound. He's a Pentagram partner in London and works with a dedicated team of sound designers, product designers, graphic designers, and developers to make all kinds of marvelous interactive stuff. So Yuri, welcome. Please, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I believe we're talking about a bit like a sort of process and how we're gonna record in the way. And there's something I'm gonna talk today is a bit like how I process some project I'm working on, and I can demonstrate a couple projects today. Let me share my screen then. Okay. Hope can you see okay then? Okay, great. So I think one project I'm gonna talk about briefly as myself working for a lot of projects based on music and sound related. And this time I'm gonna talk about a bit more detail for some musical instruments project I was working. So in the beginning process of this project, it started from like this person called Raymond Scott. He's absolutely genius talent, engineer slash musician. And he had massive success in the 50s and 60s about kind of commercial music. And Raymond Scott has been quite an innovative person. And the reason why is he created his own musical instrument, and which is electronic. And it's such advanced thinking how he designed instruments. And the first project, Electronium, which is actually like his lifetime project in Zen, and he got a really massive amount of research kind of support from like modern music that time, and Barry Gordy, founder of the modern music, giving him a lot of like funding to develop like this project. So basically, what is this instrument supposed to be? Sort of self-thinking musical instrument. So that's really about quite similar to what we're using now as a Magenta-based AI tools, like a machine learning-based, like a plugin and so on. It's very early concept. And then when I saw like this project, it's just like first of all, like this design is beautiful, and because he's an engineer and he's really caring about the aesthetic of the musical instrument. And when I saw like his documentary, like he tried to like achieve to finish like self-generated, self-thinking music machine into his life, but he couldn't achieve it because that was kind of the 60s, 70s. And if you can imagine that time, like electric resources, like quite limited, I think. Even he tried to create, kind of all that kind of a development by himself. So it's surprising he tried to make like random access memory by soldering. That's like absolutely shocking how he tried to make this kind of project to be happen. So I think he couldn't really like manage to make a very working prototype, and it has been mystery for a long time in the musical history. And then, but my aim is like we are now have got sort of tools like Magenta and also AI platform quite easy to use. Well, not easy, but our level can use it. So I tried to like realizing his dream now in 2020 that time how we can realize that project. So that's basically how I started this project. So first of all, I was analyzing what kind of like switches and interface on the panel of this instrument called Electronium. And it's absolutely mystery. Like everything 12, and 12 is very like mystery number. Basically, like it should be like a multiplier of 4, or like 4, 8, 16 is much more logical in the way. As has got 12 step sequence, 12 sound engine, so everything based on 12. So such a strange format he's creating it. But at that time, I was quite lucky to find a lot of support from brilliant people. First of all, like very thank you to Mr. Mark Mazazza, and he's well known for Devo and a great film composer. And he actually owns current in this Electronium, even not working condition. He actually like preserving it and saving it at the moment. And he shared a couple of like sort of like kind of a memo by original Raymond Scott. And also that time, Raymond Scott archive published artifacts or like kind of a hidden document. It was kind of somewhere in the storage for a long time, and that they publish on online or kind of issuing sort of like kind of books as well. So I kind of started looking what he attempted to create. So that's an absolute mystery as well. Like if you see this diagram, it's sort of like a pattern matrix, like a pattern, like almost impossible to understand, but something like related to mathematics and also music theory. And also he always merged into the electronic circuit as well. So that's absolutely difficult. However, we kind of find one document about that he actually asked by Barry Gordy from Motown Music to sharing how to use this instrument. So that massively helps to try to understand how he attempted to realize this project. And we did like long time research and also like a drawing like a lot of like potential, and we kind of closely understanding like what he tried to attempt to do as like this instrument. And finally we kind of created kind of software based one, because obviously like a budget issue, I can really produce like a really like large scale and like scale, like kind of switch and so on is quite expensive. We decided to have online sort of software simulation. So we basically set up like a 3 touch panel board and basically kind of mapping out exactly looks same as the original electronium like interface. And you can actually kind of switch on. So what Lemon Scott tried to make it happen for this project is, center part is basically kind of programming sequence and the sound. And the left side is basically he tried to improvisation by human kind of like timing. And the right side is quite interesting because this is actually sort of creating like a generative way. So basically, like if you programming sequence, keep like a kind of machine itself interacting and developing like a melody and a rhythm and so on. So that's such an interesting interface idea. So and also like if you think about the structure, it exactly looks like Magenta Studio, like later on like produced by like Google and working for Ableton. So that's what's absolutely interesting attempt he has done. And of course, like I shouldn't forget like Counterpoint is a brilliant like a creative team, also helped for like all the programming as well. So that's such a like a big treat for me to like join like this project. So in the end, like, we kind of presented as like kind of touch panel based interface, and we exhibiting at the Modern Human show. It's traveling show around the world at the moment, so that we actually are showing as one of the installation. And the second project I'm going to talk about, it's more about we're going to talk about today. It's more about musical instruments, that kind of like field I'm working. In general, I'm working for different fields such as the sound design and also product installation design and so on. But mainly I'm going to talk about the musical instruments today. And the second project is it's such a honor to collaborate with Mr. Jeff Mills, and he is well known for like techno music and also electronic music pioneer. And one time he came to me about kind of an idea about what if we can create bespoke instruments for like Jeff Mills. And he does use like this famous instrument called TR-909, which is Roland Corporation from Japan, which create quite like strong like electronic beat instruments. And this is really iconic instrument for Jeff Mills music. So we decided kind of creating bespoke like TR-909 instruments and into like different fittings. And we try to treat it as like almost like art piece as well, like not like musical instruments. So we kind of created like a unique instrument called the Visitor, which is kind of positioned between like sculpture and as well as kind of functional instruments and only for working for Jeff Mills. So something like remarkable difference is like as an interface was I designed for a bit more bigger, because if you look on like TR-909, it's like just tiny for all parameters and also buttons, which is made into like a bit more bigger and spread into like a layout. And at the same time, it's kind of circulating, which is really important key for the musical way, because this is all like straight line and coming back to the front, which is not really musical for me. But circulating like step sequences, which is very like musical, and also it's easy to manipulate as well. And as well as kind of shape of the instrument, and also it is like performance as a piece as well. So we kind of design like bespoke instruments like that. And also like we worked with like a musician where I am, and he's part of the Black Eyed Peas, to creating like series of robotic musical instruments, and which is a very unique process like we had, because we started from pretty much narrative, like nothing about final result or anything, talking about what if happen this kind of scenario in the future. So that was kind of almost taking like 3 to 4 years realizing this project, because we started from more about the narrative, what prediction for the future. And these instruments is like mechanical robotic. So like a left one is like a drum, center one is a piano, and right one is kind of guitar. And which is actually what if in the scenario in the future, because people like less and less people buying the music media, like people never buy like a CD anymore, and people downloading like an MP3. And but in the future, like what if like, but at the same time, like so many musicians actually put so much energy for live concerts. So how we can like combine between live elements and also like a music distribution. That's a starting point creating this instrument. So if you can imagine like this instrument sit on like your house, and this robotic instrument actually exactly playing how musicians play that. So for example, like for this project, actually we commissioned to Sergio Mendes playing like piano. So this hammer and so on, like exactly mimicking his like touch and everything. So that's kind of project we worked on. So like this is a really brief presentation, but I'm gonna like back to like my camera. So I'm talking about like a really good process now to talk about music distribution, and then like now like MP3 and so on, like just people like legally downloading it, or and like online streaming service like Spotify is quite popular. And but something like intriguing for me is like MP3 copy is quite easy, and CD you can have like CD burner to copying it, and also cassette tape you can have a cassette recorder. But only media like, we cannot actually like multiply or copy it like a record. So that's something kind of intriguing me a lot. So I've been working quite a project which is kind of based on like record. Then we came up with this project called like Easy Record Maker, which is like recently we kind of produce and also like selling on the market at the moment. So this is really a kind of low quality record cutting machine. So you can have like this kind of spare disc kind of put in here. And so basically this working as record player. So you can actually play music from here. So it's kind of low quality, but still like you can create your own like a record and it's really like kind of low price range. So I'm kind of like working on based on the kind of initial concept that's more about speculative idea, but try to make it happen in the both like kind of museum piece or like a product piece as well. So that's kind of like a present. I have more things to show, but I think we have like a limited time or like a discussion, I guess. So it's like nice to like talk with you.
Yes, unfortunately, we only have a few minutes left. I don't know how it flew out of
Yeah.
our control, but we have only a few minutes left. So I thank you so much for sharing that. It's such an exciting sort of series of projects. And I love this idea of kind of manifesting yesterday's dreams, like sort of being the future that the past deserves, you know, and looking at the ideas from the past and kind of creating something novel out of them. We only really have time for one quick question. And this is a question I had wanted to ask you beforehand, which was, how your experience of the pandemic has changed the way you think about creating interactive art. I mean, I imagine you've had to tackle some kind of creative workarounds in your practice, and has that
Yeah.
opened up anything new for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like pandemic is kind of really like affecting us a lot because we do a lot of physical based installation. It's more about public art. We are working a lot and required to have like interaction part in the way. But something like changed is like basically there's no physical contact and also social interaction is not possible. So it's all projects is cancelled or like postponed like last year. But we quickly changed into the old project into online based, how we can bring basically a kind of physical interaction into the something like bring to the website or like online based and the people actually can access from your home. So that we actually kind of opening up like a new possibility of our capability of the project. And also we're developing a lot like this like record player project or like another product like called color chaser, like toy, you can actually purchase in it, like rather than you go to like public space or the museum. So that's actually really opened up a lot of creative possibility for us.
Yeah, it seems like sound is a great way to keep things tactile without actually touching anyone. All right, well, thank you so much, Yuri. Yuri will be participating in a MUTEK Forum this Friday about the question of autonomy and human intention in art and AI, which ought to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to that. Tomorrow we have a full docket, which we will discuss at length tomorrow. And my guest on the recorder will be the designer and researcher Mindy Su, known for such projects as the Cyberfeminism Index, a vital archive compiling 4 decades of techno-feminism, along with lots of other things. So I'm really looking forward to a peek into Mindy's practice, and I hope you are too. Until then, keep recording. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.